Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. This is dedicated to my dear friend, our dear friend, Sean Kenny. So hello. It's nice to be able to reach out to you again. We have been talking. I've received a lot of wonderful comments from you and also live streams, discussions, for instance, the recent Karate Kid live streams that we had on the YouTube channel. So thank you so much, Sean. And also, thank you very much for being a Patreon friend and supporter. You are very kind, my dear friend. Thank you. And it's been a delight to be able to speak with you thus far. And I hope our conversations can continue for a long time to come. And so, as part of those conversations, I'd like to take a look at your favorite films list. So, as some of you may know, we have a Patreon, or I have a Patreon page with respect to my YouTube channel, and the Patreon page is open for anyone who wants to become a Patreon member. And for Patreon members and subscribers, there is a video that I have on the Patreon page where I ask my Patreon friends, what are your favorite films, and to provide me with a list. And so I'm going in order, in the order in which I received these lists. And I'm very sorry for my very slow response rate. I hope you can forgive me, but I am going through them. And it's a real pleasure for me to do so, because I really believe that one can get to know someone else by knowing what their favorite films are. And I mean that in a very positive way. I mean that in a way that is again, the possibility of maybe a film that we both might enjoy, something that is maybe in the same type of genre or filmmaker, etc. That possibility for connection and similarity in tastes, as well as just in general, just a further chance to talk about this wonderful thing which we love, which is cinema. So, my dear friend Sean Kenny, you very kindly left behind a favorites list, and I have it in front of me right now. It's on the Patreon page. Thank you very much for this. And you say, here are my top 10 favorite movies. There is some recency bias, as I haven't seen that many movies before 1990. You know, that's okay, my dear friend. Not a problem. There's no need. There's no need to, worry about that. Or I think it's a fine list that you have, a really great list. And so, what are the films that you have? So, let me go from number 10 to number 1, if that's okay. So the first one, let's see, number 10 is Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised, and this is described as being from 2021. So this is interesting. I don't know this work. I haven't seen this work. It's described as being from 2021, so that could be my own failing in terms of not being so up to date with the recent releases from, say, the last 5 or 10 years. So that's on me. But this is if it's on your list, you regarded this highly, then it comes highly recommended. So I'm very curious as to what this is. So I'll try to catch up with this if and when I can. So thank you very much for this. That's your number 10. Number 9, The Night of the Hunter, 1952. My goodness. You said in your comment before that you haven't seen that many movies before 1990, but here you are listing one of the great films, The Night of the Hunter. My goodness. Charles Lawton, Robert Mitchum. This is one of the giants. This is one of the giants of 20th century cinema. And it's one of those films that I think, for me, I remember I discovered it fairly late in my life. I mean, when I say late, I discovered it I just watched it for the first time in university. So it wasn't like I knew it growing up, but I came to it because it had a kind of cult following by then. And it was part of the discussion, but it wasn't really part of the discussion as much as, say, films like, Double Indemnity or Casablanca or other films were at the time. But this was a huge deal among film fan circles, at least when I was in my college years, and for good reason. I remember when I saw it for the first time during this period of my life, it just took me totally off guard. I was shifted. It was persuasive and scary. It was a kind of a triumphant yet almost overwhelming, and it had a certain degree of confidence and kind of suave nature that was also very deadly. And it was a real eye-opening discovery in many ways. I mean, what a classic film this is! I'm so impressed. I'm so happy that you have it listed here in your top 10 list of all places. So well done, well done. Oh, The Night of the Hunter. That is an excellent choice. And number 8, you have The Godfather from 1972. So yet again, another film prior to 1990. So well done indeed. I have spoken, I think, a little bit on this channel about The Godfather. Not as much as I would like, but maybe my relative lack of speaking about the film The Godfather on this channel is in no way indicative of my feelings of the film. On the contrary, I I absolutely adore The Godfather. Now, this is a film that I think I kind of was I wouldn't say I didn't. Well, let me take a step back. I was too young to see it in the theater, and even when I was growing up as a kid, I didn't see it directly immediately. But I knew of it. My parents loved the film. My father, in particular, he loved the film, and I remember a situation where I was too young to see it, so I wasn't permitted to watch the film when they had rented it on video to then watch at home. But I remember my mom and my dad were watching it in the room where we had the TV, and I remember my mom asking my dad when they were watching the film a question about what was happening, because there's some key things that happen in The Godfather, and there's a thing about lineage and ascendancy to the throne. You know what I mean? And so because it's about like a kind of a monarchy of power in a manner of speaking, and so who will ascend the throne in a manner of speaking. And so there is the heir apparent, and then there are the people who are next in line because of the order in which they were born, for example. So when the heir apparent, something happens to the heir apparent, then I remember my mom asking my dad a question. Oh, so does this mean that such and such character will become the Don? And I thought, and so I had never seen that type of rapport between my mom and my dad before. My mom asking a question about what was going on in the film, and my dad explaining to her some of the plot, because it's kind of hard to catch all the details, I think, upon first watch. But I think my dad by that time had watched it so many times, but for my mom, it was, I think, her first time watching it. So The Godfather. And so it was a really lovely story in terms of it may be a moment between my mom and my dad. And I remember too, I didn't know the film at the time, but it was a little bit later that I saw the film The Godfather. This was also on VHS tape, and it was very scary for me at some parts, and I think I saw it quite young. And so it was The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 on VHS. It was those times when you had the two tapes, VHS tapes sometimes. So, and it was the black covered VHS tapes, and then sometime later, but later they had the kind of the lime, not lime green, but the dark green, lime green colored casing sometimes, but it was the black covers for the first two films. And by then it was Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 for me. But The Godfather, this was a film, therefore, that I didn't see it when I was like really, 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 really young, but I did see it when I was young. And so it's a film that kind of carried through my childhood and into my early adult years, and then my adult years. So it's a film that I have seen so many times, I've lost track, and I absolutely, absolutely love it. I have a few YouTube shorts on the YouTube channel where I have some. I think I have Don Corleone impression that I've made. I'm not so good with my impressions, but I have a Don Corleone impression. I have also Michael Corleone impression, but that's from The Godfather Part 3. I suppose. Oh yeah, I have. You know what I have on the YouTube Shorts? Go check out, if you haven't already. Go check out the YouTube Shorts section of my YouTube channel. I have actually a couple of I think I have a Luca Brasi impression there. I've done my Luca Brasi impression. Also, I have two impressions that I've done of the character uh, um, um, Tessio. So Abe Vigoda's Tessio. So if you're interested, check out the YouTube shorts. And I'm particularly proud of my Tessio impression. So check it out. I guess. Well, do you mind if I do it here? So I apologize, Sean Kenny, for my very poor impression. But so here's my Tessio. So I think this is what I did on one of the YouTube shorts. So okay, Tessio. So it's kind of early on in the film, maybe the first third of the film, kind of halfway, not quite, maybe. So. Okay, so they're talking in a room, in this kind of dimly lit room, and they're trying to plan something, And then there's Tessio, there's Clemenza, and there's other people of the Corleone family there, and they're having a kind of war meeting, in a manner of speaking. And so they're planning out something, and says, so here's Tessio, Abe Vigoda. They've got an old-fashioned toilet, the box and the chain thing. We might be able to tape the gum behind it. That's my Tessio. So sorry about that for this indulgence. But your mentioning of the Godfather here is quite astounding. So I should brought some oranges with me. I said, oh, no, never mind. Oranges, maybe I shouldn't have brought them there because they're portentous in the world of the Godfather and Francis Ford Coppola films. But in any event, yes. I can't quite do Mo Green. I've always wanted to nail that impression of Mo Green where he's talking to Michael Corleone in Las Vegas, and he says, I can't quite do it. I talked to Barzini. I can't quite do it. That word talked. I talked to Barzini, but he says, I talked to Barzini. Can't quite do it, but I'll keep working on that one. But I love The Godfather. I absolutely love The Godfather. But anyway, well done. Sorry. Stalker. Oh my goodness, Stalker from 1979. This is your number 7, and I have my journey with Tarkovsky works. My journey with Tarkovsky works started somewhat later than my journeys with, say, the Godfather films. So my first foray into Tarkovsky happened when I was in college, kind of late in college, and I didn't quite get into the rhythms or cadences of Tarkovsky's films until they kind of grew on me as I got older. But I think of the films that I had first been exposed to during this period, the Tarkovsky films, I can say even maybe right now in my current state of life, I think for me the one that really resonates for the most is Mirror. But the ones that really grabbed me immediately or almost immediately were Solaris and Stalker, and I enjoyed Stalker tremendously because it felt so. How should I put it? It felt so elemental, and it felt almost experimental in a lot of ways in sort of the staging and the framing, but the concept was quite profound for me at the time, and even now, and especially now. And I didn't know about the details surrounding the production and the background details of the production until a little bit later, which created this huge myth. And my respect for the film, it was already there to begin with, but it just grew infinitely, as well as just knowing the kind of tragic and let's say harrowing details surrounding aspects of the production during and subsequent, of course. So it's a behemoth of a work. I'm so happy that you have it here. Well done indeed. And then so I'm so sorry. I'm just totally monopolizing the conversation as I do. But let me just go through some other films in your list here. So number 6, Stop Making Sense from 1984, as you cite here. Number 5, Uncut Gems from 2019. And number 4, Mulholland Drive from 2001. So let me stop here. And so Stop Making Sense. I'm so glad you mentioned the Stop Making Sense 1984. So I'm glad this is getting a kind of, I understand this is getting a kind of resurgence or maybe rediscovery of sorts in recent years. So this is really wonderful. And then Uncut Gems, I think I'd mentioned that I came to that film rather late. I didn't watch it upon initial release of the film, but I came to it as a kind of discovery, and then it was then further added on to by the Criterion release, which occurred. When did the Criterion release occur? I forget now, but it was a fairly recent release, right? It was a great release, by the way. Yeah, it's a what a dazzling work that is. So well done for choosing that. Mulholland Drive. I've spoken about this film a number of times, and this is a work that I think is appearing on a lot of lists that I have received lately. So you are in great company, my dear friend, and also you add to that sense because you too make it great company. So thank you very much. Mulholland Drive, I think what can be said that hasn't been said. I suppose it. Well, let me put it this way. Another thing too about Mulholland Drive for me was, upon watching it when I first did, there was a period in my life, I don't know, maybe a good 4 or 5 months, maybe a bit more, when after watching Mulholland Drive and becoming totally hooked on it, I would go to coffee shops and order nothing but espressos. So anyway, but my reaction to drinking the espressos was very different from the reaction of the espresso drinking that we see in the film Mulholland Drive. So it was much more, how should I say, my drinking of espressos was perhaps a little bit more. It was less flamboyantly conspicuous, perhaps. And I don't mean that in a negative connotation. I mean that very positively, because I love the way espressos are consumed in the world of Mulholland Drive. I wish I could emulate it, but I don't quite have the. I'm not. I'm afraid of being embarrassed, I suppose. But maybe one day I might try to drink an espresso in the manner that it is drunk in one of the scenes of Mulholland Drive. Well done for that, by the way. Then we have 3, 2, and 1. So number 3 is Death Proof. Number 2, Pulp Fiction. And number 1, The Big Lebowski. This is really interesting. This is really, really interesting. So number 3 and number 2. So Death Proof being the Quentin Tarantino part of the Grindhouse film, or the Grindhouse experience. And I don't know, I'm assuming this would be maybe you're referring to the extended version of Death Proof that was made available, I think, a little bit later upon home video release. I saw Grindhouse in the theater when it was initially released in the theaters way back in the day. It was a really fun experience. I went with some of my friends, and I remember the theater being packed at the time, and it was a real festival atmosphere, and people were shouting and screaming at all the. There are some scenes with there's some scenes that were really intense and quite vividly violent and over the top, campy ways, and that were really funny, and that when people were laughing and hysterical and just going along with the film. It was a really fun party-like atmosphere when we saw Grindhouse, and so that was a lot of fun. And we saw the two components, right, Planet Terror and then Death Proof. And then I remember I was fascinated at the time with Death Proof's structure, because it's and you know this, right? It's in many ways one of the great examples of, like, how should I put it? It's the setup and the payoff, and the setup is so well constructed. It's like two movies in one. Death Proof. I don't mean Grindhouse. I mean Death Proof itself. It's like the first part and the second part, and the first part, it's its own little mini movie, and the second part, it's its own little mini movie as well. And the first part, in many ways, it's like the setup for what you think you're going to get in the second part, which I think is brilliant, because it means all the suspense is like stuffed into. I mean, the tension of the first part is just through the roof, and the way that it kind of resolves, as you know, it's quite a kind of memorable way that it reaches its resolution, and it goes into the second part. So you're left with all this baggage of tension and suspense and release from the first film, from the first part. But you think, oh my goodness, what's going to happen here? Is the same thing going to happen? It may or may not, which is again part of the thrill and fun and the delight and surprise of Death Proof overall. I think that's a really great choice. That is a really great choice. So well done for that. Well done for that. Yeah, well done indeed. And then Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction is this is one of those films where it was and is it just was like a it was so magnetic, and it was like a everyone was talking about it. I mean, everyone was talking about. I remember I was in what was it? I was in I was in high school at the time, and I was in a high school, my history class, and I remember a student who was, I think, 1 year older than me, but we were in the same class, a history class, and she was talking about Pulp Fiction for like most of the class. It was amazing, and so it was just, she was just so fascinating. She loved Pulp Fiction, and I hadn't seen it yet, but I'd heard about it and just heard rumblings and rumors, and I got the soundtrack of Pulp Fiction. And then I got the soundtrack before I saw the film, if I remember correctly. And so I remember just hearing the soundtrack, just being totally blown away by it, and the way that it incorporated these clips of dialogue. You know, like "I love you, pumpkin. I love you, honey bunny." I you know. And right, so it was quite a thing indeed. And then when I was able to see the film a little bit later, it was so much fun. It was so much fun. I mean, what can I say? What can I say? Um, like I was just fascinated with the details, like when Uma Thurman does that thing of don't be a or um, gosh, um, my goodness. I Yes, like there are moments where it's just so filled with tension and it's funny at the same time, which is, I think, such a great juxtaposition. You know, people can be heroes and villains at once. I mean, take a character like, I don't know, like Vincent Vega, for instance. You know, at one minute you're rooting for him, at another minute he becomes this arch nemesis within the time span of a few minutes, even depending on the story that we're talking about, which I think is really fascinating. You know, it's all about perspective. That film is really much about perspective, as well as other things, as well as the great speeches. You know, and what I love, what I absolutely love about this work is how it incorporates violence in a way that's very shocking and very bloody in some points. But then when we have that knowledge, we understand that sometimes we are confronted with very violent scenes, but if you upon close inspection, a lot of the violence in those scenes can be said to be off screen, or it's in our minds, and it's being the elements of the film are enabling us to imagine these things, which makes it even more horrifying and effective, which is a really a brilliant way of using cinema. It's still very provocative and quite shocking, and there are some controversial points about it even now in terms of use of certain phrases of language, etc. Even now, it's a kind of there are some points of controversy, and even then, it was a point of controversy. A word about the dialogue, though, it was like it was a thing about. Um, uh, I might have mentioned it before. I think I mentioned it in another list discussion, but the word correctamundo how it's used by the Samuel Jackson character in a key scene of the film. It's really great, and um, I don't know, things like buttermilk pancakes or something, or um, let's see. I mean, there are some key sequences, and I'll try to be as vague as possible here, but let's see here. Um, by the way, where I live right now, very close to where some of the locations were for Pulp Fiction, as I understand it. They're not quite the same as they were in the film, but I drove by one of the locations a few weeks ago. It was really great. It's not quite the same now, but it's really great. Um, on Hawthorne Boulevard. Number one, The Big Lebowski. I saw this in the theater too. and this was also a very big deal, a really really big deal. I remember it came after Fargo, right, in terms of the Coen brothers filmography. So there was a lot of buzz. Fargo was a huge, huge hit critically, and it was just so acclaimed across the board, it seemed, and all the awards attention, etc. And so when The Big Lebowski came, which was their next the film, it was the follow-up to Fargo, etc. It was a really, really big deal. And I was so excited to watch in the theater. And I saw it, and it was like a total WTF film going experience for me. I thought I was going to go see it for one thing, and it kind of was. It was this murder mystery. Now they look about like LA noir film mystery or kind of detective story. But I wasn't quite expecting it to be this detective story. And I wasn't quite expecting it to be so funny and all these references to um, George H.W. Bush and also um, now quotes that have become so iconic in the lore. Where's the money, Lebowski, etc. For me, I think I remember for whatever reason, I think that for whatever reason, the name that lingers in my mind upon watching this film is the name Carl Hungus. You remember that name or the reference in The Big Lebowski? But in any event, why am I? Why does that? Why? Whenever I think of The Big Lebowski, for it is Carl Hungus, the name Carl Hungus. It made an impact, I suppose. But and the use of art and uh, Julianne Moore's performance. It's very radically like out there, which is one of the great things about all the performances here, with Jeff Bridges as a wonderful kind of anchor. Who is the unexpected detective of this world? You don't quite expect him to be, but he is this anchor, and he's guided by the earnest nature of what it is he wants, which is very humble in terms of his routine, which is essentially disturbed, and he has to kind of get the order back while trying to work out what's going on with his friends there. And his relationships there, in particular, the performance between him and John Goodman are out of this world. And there's also a period in my life after watching The Big Lebowski where I would listen on a loop to a lot of the Big Lebowski songs as a soundtrack's great. I mean, I think the one that I was really hooked on the most was the one during the kind of the dance number bowling dream sequence, and that was the one where Jeff Bridges, who dances really well, kind of the Charleston twisting knees kind of thing down the steps. I always wanted to try to do that, but I was trying to practice dancing like Jeff Bridges. I could never do it. I'm still trying, by the way. But the song that's over that is the what's it? Kenny Rogers, right? It was just dropped in to see to see what condition my condition was in, right? So I just listened to that song over and over. I hadn't heard that song before until I watched the film. So, but it's a kind of famous song. That was great. That was really really great. And then I learned later. I think it was on maybe one of the DVDs or something of The Big Lebowski about this, how Jeff Bridges is flying through. You have all the dancers and they're standing kind of with their legs spread apart in a way. So Jeff Bridges' character is meant to fly under the parade of dancers there, and so I understand that they had to. I think they had to. Do I have this right? It was physically impossible based on the physical dimensions of everything for it to actually happen that way. So they had to kind of shrink the dimensions of Jeff Bridges' body, I think, in post in order to be able to succeed in that effect. At least that's my understanding of it. I forget. It's been a while since I've seen behind the scenes or commentaries or anything like that with The Big Lebowski. I should really try to refresh my memory on that. But yeah, The Big Lebowski. You're number one. That's well done. Well done. Oh gosh, well done indeed. I am very impressed, Sean. I am so sorry. I think I have monopolized your time. I apologize for my very, very bad takes on these films. I hope you can forgive me. But thank you so much, Sean, for sharing this with me. I very much appreciate it. I'm so, so honored by this, that you'd be willing to share a little bit of yourself with me and with the rest of us in this way. Truly, I am honored. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I look forward to our continuing conversations, Sean. So this is for you. And then for anyone who might still be interested, the Patreon page is still there. I will leave this option open. I think it's now the middle of April when the time I make this, April 2024. So I'm still happy to receive lists from people. Maybe I'll leave this option available until the end of the month of April. So if you want to become a Patreon member and you want to have me respond to your list, please feel free to go to the Patreon page and check out the video in question and leave behind a list and become and let me know. So it's open to Patreon supporters. Again, for anyone who's interested, you don't have to do anything you don't want to. So if you don't like to be the supporter of my Patreon page, I'm not at all offended. So don't worry about it. I completely understand. But for those who are Patreon supporters and who are interested, you can do that. And I'll leave this option available for my Patreon supporters until the end of the month. So you have until whatever it is, April 30th, if you want to leave behind a list, and I can make a video on it. So thank you very much, Sean, and thank you very much to all my Patreon supporters. You are very, very kind indeed. And thank you to all of you, my dear, dear friends. You are all very, very, very kind indeed. I hope this video finds you well. And until the next one, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great movies. Thank you and cheers. Thank you.